It started with a blood-stained carpet. A neighbor noticed a weird smell, a trail of red seeping from under the door, and a cat meowing nonstop. But inside that quiet suburban apartment was a scene straight out of a horror film. What no one realized then was that this gruesome crime wouldn't just make headlines, it would become the chilling inspiration behind one of the most critically acclaimed movies of the decade. But the real story? It's even darker than the film. The year was 2003, Austin, Texas. A city that blended college town charm with indie weirdness, full of music, art, and a growing underground film scene. That's where Clara Murphy lived, a 24-year-old aspiring actress with big dreams, a crooked smile, and a complicated past. She had moved from Tulsa to make it, and quickly fell in with a crowd of creatives. Low-budget filmmakers, theater kids, indie musicians. People who believed art was everything and boundaries didn't matter. Among them was Daniel Whitaker, 27, a local screenwriter with a knack for dialogue, a fragile ego, and a serious obsession with Clara. They had dated, briefly. It was chaotic, dramatic, and full of red flags. Friends described Daniel as clingy and moody. Clara once called him a genius but exhausting. By 2003 they weren't together. But Daniel wasn't over her. And Clara? She was finally landing on her feet. Auditioning for regional roles, filming a gritty short film downtown, and, this is key, she had just landed a meeting with a real talent agent from LA. She was finally getting out. Until she didn't. It was August 16th, a Saturday. Clara didn't show up for her film shoot. At first, her crew thought she was just flaking. It happened. But then she didn't answer her phone. Or text back. Or post to LiveJournal, which was rare. By Sunday night, her neighbor noticed the smell. When police arrived at Clara's apartment, what they found was horrifying. The front door was unlocked. Her cat was meowing frantically in the hallway. There were streaks of something dark on the tile. Inside the apartment was a bloodbath. There were signs of a struggle. Furniture overturned, a shattered mirror, a broken wine glass on the floor. Clara's body was found in her bedroom, wrapped in a blood-soaked bedsheet, with duct tape still loosely hanging from her wrists. She had been stabbed over 30 times, mostly in the chest and abdomen. The attack was frenzied overkill. And here's the most disturbing detail. There was a camera set up on a tripod at the foot of her bed. No tape, no memory card. Just the eerie presence of a setup that didn't belong. Detective Mark Riley, a 22-year veteran of Austin PD, took the lead. To him, this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. The scene was too intimate. The rage too specific. Clara's phone, laptop, and camera were gone. But nothing else of value, not her wallet, not her jewelry, had been taken. Police started with the obvious, Clara's inner circle. One name kept coming up. Daniel Whitaker. Everyone had a Daniel story. How he got weird when Clara broke up with him. How he once slashed the tires of her co-star's car. How he would show up on set uninvited just to check on her. Even creepier, someone remembered that Daniel was writing a screenplay. A horror film. About an actress who gets murdered in her apartment by an obsessive ex-boyfriend. Sound familiar? When police brought Daniel in for questioning, he didn't lawyer up. He talked. A lot. He said he hadn't seen Clara in weeks. Claimed he was home all weekend writing. He even mentioned the film idea, casually as if it were a coincidence. But something felt off. When detectives asked to search his apartment, Daniel hesitated. That hesitation was all they needed for a warrant. And what they found cracked the case wide open. Daniel Whitaker's apartment was just 6 blocks from Clara's. It was a dimly lit, cramped studio lined with overflowing bookshelves, stacks of screenplay drafts, and dusty camera equipment. But what really grabbed detectives' attention was the closet. Inside they found a duffel bag, stuffed with a blood-stained t-shirt, duct tape, and, most chilling of all, a digital camcorder. The camcorder was missing its memory card. But next to it, in a small box under his desk, police recovered 2 SD cards, labeled with masking tape. One read, Scene 4, Clara. Detective Riley's team rushed to forensics. When they loaded the footage, what they saw left the entire squad silent. The clip was grainy, handheld, but unmistakable. Clara, alive, sat on the edge of her bed, visibly uncomfortable. She wasn't acting. She was nervous. The voice behind the camera, presumably Daniel's, prompted her repeatedly to say the line again, referencing dialogue from a script. The scene wasn't violent. Not yet. But it was eerie. Clara kept glancing off-screen as if someone else was there. Her voice shook. She looked directly at the camera and whispered, "I don't want to do this anymore." Then the footage cut. A second, shorter clip began. This one showed only darkness, and then screaming. The screen never revealed the violence, but the audio was unmistakable. Scuffling, objects breaking, Clara's voice crying out, begging. And then silence. The final shot was static. Then the file ended. It wasn't just murder. It was filmed. And Daniel had tried to write it off as art. On August 22, 2003, 6 days after Clara's body was found, police arrested Daniel Whitaker for murder. His behavior during interrogation turned erratic. He claimed the footage was a performance piece, said Clara had consented, that she was in on it. But when detectives pressed him, his story crumbled. He said Clara had laughed at him, that she didn't take him seriously, that she told him his script was trash, that she was leaving, going to LA. That's when something snapped. The physical evidence sealed his fate. Clara's blood on his shirt, his fingerprints on the duct tape, and the final blow, a rough draft of a screenplay in his laptop titled Final Girl, based on true events. It was a fictionalized account of what he'd done. In his mind, this was his legacy. Daniel's trial began in early 2005 and became a media circus. Local press called him the director. National outlets dubbed it the snuff film murder. The prosecution presented a disturbing narrative, a failed writer who orchestrated a real-life horror film, casting his ex-girlfriend as the victim, without her consent and without her surviving the premiere. They emphasized premeditation, the camera setup, the taped lines, the script that mirrored the events, and Daniel's online searches for painless ways to knock someone out and how to erase SD card data. Daniel's defense? Insanity. His attorneys claimed he suffered from paranoid delusions and a blurring of reality and fiction, that he didn't understand what he was doing, that in his mind, it was all part of a meta film. The jury didn't buy it. After 2 weeks of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Daniel Whitaker was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the story didn't end there. 2 years after Daniel's conviction, a buzz began in the indie film community. A script called Killing Clara was circulating, a fictional retelling of the case, written by a former UT Austin student who had followed the trial obsessively. The project caught the eye of a small production company in LA, and by 2008, it was greenlit under a new title: Obsession. The plot? A young, ambitious actress gets lured into a toxic relationship with a troubled screenwriter who casts her in a film she doesn't realize is real, until it's too late. The movie was released in 2009. It starred an up-and-coming actress and a relatively unknown lead. It premiered at Sundance. Critics praised its haunting realism and psychological intensity. It was marketed as inspired by true events, though the names were changed and the ending altered. The film's Clara character survives. It became a cult hit. What most viewers didn't know was that the real Clara never got a second chance. And the real killer? He got exactly what he wanted: a story that would never die. When Obsession hit streaming platforms in late 2009, it went viral in a way no one expected. True crime fans, indie horror junkies, and even TikTok teens years later latched onto the twisted story. The trailer alone racked up millions of views. A grainy scene of the actress whispering, "I don't want to do this anymore," gave everyone chills. But not everyone was thrilled. Clara's parents, Tom and Lydia Murphy, first heard about the film from a neighbor's kid. Not a lawyer, not a producer, not even a courtesy call. They were blindsided. They watched the trailer. It felt like being stabbed all over again. There she was, their daughter, fictionalized. Her name changed, sure. But the actress had Clara's haircut, her clothes, the same apartment layout. Even the duct tape detail was in the script. They were devastated and angry. They reached out to the studio with a cease and desist. But the film was legally protected. It was labeled fictionalized and loosely inspired. No legal claim stuck. Still, the Murphys gave one haunting interview. Tom said, "They made a horror movie out of our daughter's death. They call it entertainment. But for us, it's a crime scene that never stops playing." In 2010, Daniel Whitaker sat in a maximum security unit at the Polunsky unit in Texas, the same place many death row inmates are housed. He wasn't eligible for parole. He wasn't allowed internet access. But somehow he found out about the film. A letter leaked from a prison staffer revealed Daniel's chilling response. He wrote in all caps, "They finally got it right. The story works." He wasn't angry. He was proud. Even behind bars, Daniel saw the film as vindication, as proof that his art lived on. He called himself the uncredited architect of Obsession. In another letter he wrote, "Stories outlive bodies. That's the point." The prison cut off his outgoing male privileges shortly after. But the damage was done. It was clear, Daniel didn't regret the murder. He regretted not being credited for the screenplay. By 2013, Obsession had become a cult classic. Reddit threads dissected every frame. Fan theories popped up. People speculated the film was cursed, or that the actress who played Clara had a breakdown after filming. Some fans even discovered the real case, connecting the dots back to Clara Murphy's murder. And from there, things got even darker. True crime YouTubers began covering the real story behind Obsession. Podcasts started reinvestigating Clara's life. A TikTok creator with 1.8 million followers did a makeup tutorial while telling the story of the actress who died in real life, complete with a glamorized recreation of the crime scene. It was viral content. clicks, views, comments. But Clara? She became a character, a meme, a story that wasn't hers anymore. In 2015, on what would have been Clara's 36th birthday, her sister Erin Murphy launched a website, www.clarawastachepperson.com. It was bare bones. No flashy graphics. Just photos of Clara smiling at her high school play, making faces with her cat, scribbling in her notebooks. The homepage read, "She wasn't a movie, she was my sister. This site is the truth." The website included entries from Clara's journals, excerpts from her original short films, and scanned pages from her final screenplay draft. The Stranger's Window, a psychological thriller Clara was writing before she died. Erin gave interviews and spoke at film schools, warning them about what it meant to turn real trauma into fiction. One quote went viral. "When your pain becomes someone else's profit, how do you grieve? My sister wasn't a plot twist. She was a person." The site eventually helped shift the conversation. A 2020 documentary, Behind the Fiction, The Clara Murphy Case, aired on HBO Max, reclaiming the narrative and exposing how the entertainment industry quietly profits from uncredited real-life horrors. Where are they now? Daniel Whitaker remains in prison, serving a life sentence without parole. He's been denied all future appeals and has become a case study in forensic psychology classes, particularly for how fantasy blurred into fatal obsession. The director of Obsession has since distanced himself from the film, claiming he had no idea how closely the screenplay matched real events. But leaked emails suggest otherwise, that early drafts were pulled from newspaper clippings about Clara's murder. The actress who played Clara left the industry in 2012 after a publicized mental health crisis. She later said in an interview, "I didn't know I was acting out a real person's death, and once I did, I couldn't unsee it." Clara's legacy lives on in her writing. In 2023, Erin Murphy published her sister's unfinished screenplay as a book titled The Stranger's Window. It became a bestseller. This story raises a haunting question. When does storytelling become exploitation? In the rush to turn tragedy into content, how many real people, real victims, get lost in the edit? Clara Murphy was more than a plot device, more than an inspiration. She was a creator, a sister, a survivor of a toxic relationship who didn't get the ending she deserved. And maybe that's the real horror here. Not just that she was murdered, but that, for years, she wasn't remembered as Clara Murphy. She was remembered as a character in someone else's movie, The True Crime Diary. Subscribe for more haunting stories from the darkest corners of the internet.